Hello, welcome to Discover Energy at Work. I'm just remembering I used to go, hello, welcome to Discover Energy at Work, like trying to raise the vibe. And I just feel like, you're here, you're a friend. Thanks for coming back. You're listening to me, to us talking again, my guests every week. I'm just so grateful. So thank you so much. Discover Energy Work, there's so many people, through my third season, and we've got 18 episodes this week, and I'm recording this maybe 19 or 20 when it comes out. There's so many people with so many incredible experiences, and they're ordinary people like you and me, and some of them have done amazing things, and some of them are they're just continuing with their life, but they've got this sort of other knowledge. And I'm so lucky today to be with Victoria. Victoria, is it Rader or Rader? Rader. Okay, so my German influence would go Rader.
I'll take it all. It all.
Right. And I spoke, obviously I speak to people before I invite them on the show, because I'm fascinated to make sure that it's right. And I remember it was like 2 or 3 weeks ago, I said, yeah, please, we've got to have you on the show. There's a story. And I'm now I've got the greatest mind. It only lets me remember, I don't know, a little bit of what I experience, and that's kind of cool for me. So I'm excited. I know it's an exciting story. Victoria, would you introduce yourself?
Yes, absolutely. First of all, Richard, thank you. This is a wonderful opportunity to talk to you and just to enjoy your beautiful listeners. I can feel the energy of your podcast. It is in itself healing. I'm just going to speak into it, you guys, because I think as you listen to the messages, sometimes the miracle of healing can be overlooked. And when I listened to a couple of your episodes with your guests, there's some beautiful subliminal healing that happens. And so even if you're a regular listener, you can hopefully be aware of that. And that's just such a beautiful additional gift that this podcast brings. So I'm excited to be here. I have a company. A company's name is You to Shine that I've now been running for over a decade. And I refer to myself as a possibility coach. This is a branding that's been crafted for me by my clients. When my publicist said, look, you're doing apps now. We have 2 wonderful healing apps. You're doing all these programs, but you don't have a title. What is it that you do? So I asked my clients, I said, hey guys, I need a title, PhD is beaten. I'm no doctor. I'm Vika. So what do you call me? And the story after story started coming in of saying, I thought it was impossible to get out of $100,000 debt. And now I'm debt free and I'm running a couple of businesses. I thought it was impossible to have a child. Now we have 3. I thought it was impossible to heal from cancer. This is 10 years ago, And so there was a common theme of seeing something that appears to be impossible and then making it happen. And that's kind of what I do in a nutshell. I allow for people to expand their awareness to a possibility of the best and highest solution. And then I empower them to live into that solution. So I'm not a miracle worker. I'm just a witness.
That's, that's a lovely introduction. And, it reminds me, like last week I was talking to Michaela Hay, and she said, well, I'm doing energy work. So, and also my experience, you're doing energy work. What do you want? We can start working with the energy. Like it's the, you might say the blueprint of the universe is written in the energy. So we're working with a very, very fundamental substance, you might say. I think they're so difficult to use words for energy, isn't it? But,
very serendipitously, you viewers cannot see, but you can, and I'll read it. I'm wearing a t-shirt, and the t-shirt says, you matter. Unless you multiply it by light squared, then you energy. So, uh,
An
so
Einsteinian joke, yes.
oh, very much so. Oh, and speaking of Einstein, I think he's been the greatest inspiration behind everything I do, because there's this quote that he said that, um, let me reframe it and remind it. When you match the frequency of the reality that you want, you cannot help but get that reality. This is not philosophy, this is physics. So when we talk about energy, I think one of the reasons it's so quote unquote hard to define it is because everything is. The first universal law of energy is energy is. And then the second, and you can say God is, light is, but energy is. And then the second, of course, universal law backing it up is it is neither created nor destroyed. It is continually translated, transmuted, and transfigured. And so we are energy. Matter is just the slowest frequency of energy. And I think the healing process is when we allow for our matter to allow for the energy to go through it and to purify it from any blocks. There's no miracle to healing. Our bodies are healing all the time. As people ask, I've witnessed some of these in my physical, because I work with all levels of being a physical, mental, emotional. People go like, oh my gosh, this person just had an instantaneous healing. And I'm very cautious about how I define instantaneous healings, because what appears to us, to our physical experience as instantaneous, is something that human being has been preparing for over a period of time. And in the moment when you get to witness that last drop of a miracle, it's like, oh my gosh, it just happened. And so on the other hand, if you find yourself right now in a situation where you've addressed a certain issue in many ways and you feel nothing's happening, please realize it is happening. It's just there is a law of time, and you will have your instantaneo's healing. It just like sometimes they take 10 years.
It's so fascinating. And you say there's a law of time, and yet we have people whose time has been bent for them in their own experiences. So even that, just like we really, I mean, it's so amazing. I think you're totally right. I do remember that when we spoke, I thought, oh wow, this person has got the most amazing way of summing things up in a really, structured way that anybody can understand it. Yes, I do remember that, Victoria. I want to hear what you're doing now, but I also want to go back to, like, where do you come from? Like, who is, I mean, of course, this is a very difficult question to answer because there is no real answer, but where does it start? Where does this energy work start?
Richard, I've asked myself that question driving into the office here to do the interview with you, because I thought I have so many stories. Which story is the story for this podcast? And I was taken back to two of my grandpas. So I'm going to share. This is where it starts as per this podcast, right? Because I think my first grandpa was my mom's dad. His name was Alexander. I was born in the Soviet Union, in Ukraine, which is now Ukraine, but was a part of the Soviet Union. And every summer I spent in the village with my grandpa Sasha. Alexander is a full name, when I was little. And when I was 5, he suddenly died of a stroke. And that was my first brush with death. I remember sitting there on, they had little tiny house, 5 kids, one of which was my mom, was brought up in a 1-bedroom house with an outhouse, and I just remember sitting on the bed there, and his body was in the same little room, and going through all of the stages of grief without knowing it, being 5. And I remember the guilt the most, because I sat there and I was trying to figure out, how did I contribute to this outcome? I saw losing him as a punishment. And I remember clearly one thing. I didn't like to eat, eat. It's just, I had issues with eating, was too busy, didn't take time to eat. And I remember clearly sitting on that bed and saying, if only I can have him back, I promise I will eat better. don't completely unrelated, schematic, but that was my first communication with divine presence, with divine intelligence, with God. You're not allowed to believe in God in the Soviet Union. I was not brought up religious or spiritual in any way. You had a God, his name was Lenin.
Right, right. And
and
Stalin, and yeah.
but that was my inner yearning for figuring out death.
Mm.
And then I've made a connection. I went into such a shock when that happened, because I was left at home by myself with my cousin who was pregnant at the time. And my parents didn't want me to be traumatized by the whole funeral procedure where they, lower a person in and cover them with with dirt. And so I, of course, wanted to know where they were taking grandpa. So I ended up running behind the funeral proceedings, hiding as to not be seen. So if you think of a whole bunch of subconscious programs that are being formed in this 5-year-old girl. So I'm grieving, I'm scared, I'm guilty, and I'm hiding. And that became a pattern of how I showed up in life for a while. It became extremely shy. I had strep throats. When we don't express our truth, our spiritual causes our physical, right? So when I started having a lot of strep throats. I didn't express myself very well until about age of 11. I had no friends. It was just kind of me and my books. And that was a forming of me on one side, and, learning what life is as defined by death. And I truly believe that death serves a very important role because it defines life. It gives life parameters. Yeah. And I had that gift very early on. And then on the second side, you have a very different story that happens about the same age. I'm about 5 or 6. And this is my grandpa Volodya, and that's my dad's dad. And he has had a little bit of a temper, quite a little bit of a temper. And so I knew that when he's watching me, I got to be quiet. Here we go, quiet again. And so I kind of have to be quiet. And so I was minding my own business. I was playing in the room. And played house and figured that I wanted to have a hanger from my doll's clothes. Had a hairpin, metal hairpin, and had an electric outlet right there asking to be serving as a little hanger. So I took the pin, I plugged it into the outlet, and now there was a huge electric shock. And I wasn't knocked out. There weren't angels appearing, at least not until much later in my life. But what happened? Fuses blew, and then my grandpa blew, and but experience stayed with me, and it was continuing the story of who I am. It was probably into my about 15 years ago, so into my 30s, I found myself in a period of life where everything was dark. My health, I had few diagnoses piling up. My marriage was kind of shaky. We were broke financially, just all of these things that were creating quite a bit of a darkness. And as I was meditating and praying my way out, a voice came in the middle of the night saying, "Stop fighting the darkness, just turn on the light." And that moment from childhood was brought to me. And I made a very powerful parallel on which I talk all the time. With electricity, the electrical power that comes into the house is the same that goes to every single outlet. But it is the resistance that the devices have that allow how much power goes through. So your 40 watt, light bulb will only allow dim light, but your 100 watts light bulb will allow very bright light. So the power is the same. The resistance either limits the power or expands it. And I realized that it was dark in my life because I was at a maximum resistance, and that all I have to do going forward is learn how to literally get out of the light's way. And hence started the certifications and the seeking and the healing. Even though as a child, I had a lot of genuine talent, it was completely suppressed by that inability to express. That created a lot of darkness. And serendipitously so, Richard, you're interviewing me one day after I launched my podcast that's called All About the Voice. You tell me that's a coincidence.
Well, there's no coincidences, you could say that. I mean, it's all, I like to think, well, although there's a film coming out called The Matrix, I like to think it is about a matrix of energy that really, it's a fascinating matrix of everything. We're connected with it, but a bit like the internet, sometimes you know your connection is not, you don't have the bandwidth, you're still on dial-up, you know, and so, but I mean, I find that it's that process of breaking down. I mean, I was talking last week to Stanley Krippner. He's a professor who's done a lot of scientific work, professor of psychology, and he's done a lot of scientific work on psychic phenomena, apports, like things appearing from nowhere, literal physical objects appearing. And he's on the scientific, he's taken a skeptic with him. He's a professor. He's not an associate professor. He's a real professor. He's taken a skeptic. He's taken a physicist that's measuring, you know, electromagnetic fields. Yeah, and they're finding things. Now, what I find fascinating is how he says that we can predict how psychic somebody is. And I don't really think my podcast is about being psychic. I mean, psychic's just part of it. But you can predict how psychic somebody is by what they call the thick boundary or the thin boundary. So some people, our matrix of who we are, as it were, doesn't allow us to go out into the world. It allows us to literally sort of just stay about up to here, and we're not allowing our spirit to grow. And other people, they're probably a little bit oversensitive sometimes, but they can feel in a bigger way. So I really like your analogy of like resistance. So were you resistant? I mean, and how did you break down your resistance?
Well, going back to psychic and bringing that from that perspective, you know, one of the modalities that I love is theta healing. And I like it because it defines psychic abilities very clearly as 4 different aspects. And it invites everybody to realize that we are born with at least one of those abilities. And it's the journey of expanding all 4. And so the 4 psychic, because when you just say the word psychic, what does it mean? Well, it's you do paranormal stuff, but I love what Vienna has done. Vienna Steibel is the, I guess, the author or the creator of this modality, because she's broken it down into 4 aspects. And she said it's a 4-aspected reality. You can be clairvoyant. Clairvoyant psychic ability is ability to foresee things going both in the future and the present. And it's just a probability on a time continuum, right? Or people that travel to different geographic location through their ability to see. So that's clairvoyant. Then there's clairaudient. Those are the people that hear things. You know, not all voices you hear mean that you're schizophrenic. Some people, it's just discerning which voices you hear. So they're clairaudient. Then the third one is empathetic. And that's where a lot of people start their psychic journey. And that's where the boundaries are preset for a lot of people. An empathetic person is somebody who feels things. And a lot of people right now on the earth are very empathetic. You walk into the room, you were happy, and all of a sudden you're sad. You have no idea why you're sad. Well, you're psychic. You're scanning someone else's emotion or the general emotion in the room. And I can prove to you that everyone is psychic, because when was the last time you thought of somebody's name and they either called you or texted you or said they were thinking about you, right? And that's, so it's just finding which aspect of being psychic you are and then expanding it. And then the last 4th aspect, it's called prophecy. And prophecy is divine knowing. It's when you simply know. You can't prove it. Don't try to prove it to people that don't believe. That's in definition. You can't prove to a non-believer. You can just know. And so wherever you are in your life, you start there. And I was very, very, I would say, prophetic in my psychic abilities as to where I just knew. I knew which people to trust with. Knowing doesn't mean following.
Mm.
Knowing that somebody can hurt you doesn't mean that you don't go into a business partnership with. I've done
Right.
that. So
Right.
it's, find the gift that you have, whether you're empathetic or you are clairvoyant or you're clairaudient. And then as you expand your ability, those boundaries safely melt. And I say safely because if you do it too fast, or if your psychic ability comes as a result of shock, then you don't know the difference between your energy and the world's energy. And
Mm.
this is where the mental stress comes from, and where
Mm.
you can become overly sensitive to that
Mm.
reality.
Mm.
So in my case, because I came with that gift of knowing, that is what I focused on. And I would meditate on the knowing. And I would say, okay, which way, which way, which way, which way. And every time I followed, that ability expanded. And then the clairvoyance came in as to where I can scan a person's body. For example, Richard, just talking with you last time, I went to my app phone and I was guided to download the Tai Chi app. Now, knowing that there's no coincidence, I said, wait a minute, I was just in Richard's energy. Let me Google him and see whether he has anything to do with Tai Chi. So
Only a lot,
we're
yeah.
continually influencing each other, right? We're
Yeah.
continually influencing each other. It's just that sometimes we're unaware. But when things come out of a blue, when the universe has invited me to explore Tai Chi, that's when I pause. And this is how you guys expand your psychic ability and say, wait a minute, what was my most recent interaction? And then I was just amazed to know that, yes, you have impacted me. And the only difference between me and somebody who thinks they're not psychic is that I am aware of the impact.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's just, I love what you're saying. And it's so, it's, that I just thinking it's so different to me because I have to go, well, there's Professor Daryl Benn's experiments on seeing the future, Rupert Sheldrake's, the sense of being stared at, where he's done these incredible experiments, which is all done to the scientific level. And then what you're saying is so simple. And so I was watching a documentary this afternoon. It's like a scientist is saying, just because we don't scientifically know it doesn't mean it's not possible and it's not true. Yeah. And so many things like this, so many people know that it's scientifically, there's great scientific evidence for its existence, but there seems to be, I think there seems to be this sort of a fear of not being accepted by other people if you own it. And I think that's that's part of why I started the podcast. Is I wanted to just put out stories of people who'd had experiences and they'd gone with it, and some of these experiences are really quite small. I mean if I compare them with some of the things I've had, I feel like the elephants had to take a hammer and bash me on the head, to say, like, really, will you pay attention? Because they've had a dream, and then the dream has actually happened, and that's changed their life, and they're off on a way. And for me, it's like, yeah, it just keeps on coming back to bash me on the head. So obviously, I've got, in some ways, got these thick boundaries, and these other ways got these thin boundaries. So yeah. Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? But you said, so I'm going to be doing a series of people, I've already interviewed a couple of them, who've had spontaneous healing. So essentially, that the category is a sickness which is incurable by normal known means that is then healed. Yeah. Yeah, a complete healing. A good example of that would be somebody having, and this is a real example, somebody having multiple sclerosis with scarring in the brain. I mean, it's done, and then actually all of the scarring disappearing and then healing. And that's from, I refer to Jeffrey Rediger's book called Cured. And it's like, yeah, but this is, I've got a chance, and everybody's got a chance to hear about your story with that. Because for a lot of people, I think, you know, it's not that I want to take away any traditional approaches, or maybe this is the traditional approach, but I want people to know there is another approach. So
Yeah,
what happened there?
you know, I was originally the story I shared with you was my nephew's story, but the way you've redefined spontaneous healing, another aspect came in because I think so. I will kind of share briefly with my nephew. He was born with non-functional aorta, with two valves that were not closing, a hole in his heart, and a murmur in his heart. He was born with 5 conditions. And
Right, and the aorta, just for everybody, the aorta is like the main blood vessel coming from the heart. It's under a massive amount of pressure. Everything happens. It sends the blood to all the organs. If there's a problem there, you've got, it's like not having a foundation to the house. It's really, really serious. Yeah.
you know, the poignant moment of that birth was looking back, I was allowed to be there because I was doing healing even as my sister-in-law was giving birth. And the baby was immediately, she got to hold him for about literally maybe 5 seconds before he was taken away and hooked up to, you know, to the all the devices and given medication to keep the aorta open. So coarctation in aorta prevents the aorta from opening and allowing the blood to flow. And so that's kind of what they've done. And he was scheduled for the surgery for that first condition within 48 hours because they wanted his lungs to mature enough to do the surgery. It's a condition that happens, I think. And what happened there that was for some reason was very poignant is that while there were not just her delivery doctor and the nurses, there were also obviously pediatric cardiologists. She was in the best cardiology pediatrics hospital next door to in Washington, D.C. for the condition of the baby. But the thing that stayed with me was in the room was a helicopter nurse. And gratefully, my sister-in-law was spared emotionally because she was so excited that there were all these people to welcome her baby. While looking back, you know, we understand that when you have a helicopter nurse, they're not there for the baby that's being delivered. They're there to collect the organs for other babies to help their life if this baby doesn't make. That's why you have a helicopter nurse. And so gratefully, my little nephew was born, and I started working on him. And by starting working on him, I was doing 2 different things. My adaptation of quantum touch, where a person lays hands on the body and allows the energy to flow through them, trusting the process, trusting that the energy will be doing the healing. And while I was doing that for him, I was working using theta healing on his genetics, because sometimes our genetics determine our condition. That answers the question to a lot of people of saying, how can a pure spirit, pure being come into non-functional body? How could they've possibly created that, right? And I'm not going to go down the road of philosophies. Is it karma? Is it not? I'm just going to go with simple genetics here. Genetics that, you know, that the baby inherits. And so I had access to genetics because my brother and his wife were right there. So I was shifting programs genetically for them. What does that mean? If you think of your thought patterns, your thoughts are electric. Every time you think something, an electric impulse travels through your brain. As it travels through your brain, it makes a pathway. For example, if you go through the forest and you're the first person to go through, it's very hard to get through. If you're the 10th person, there's a slight passage. But if you're a millionth person, most likely you have a pure clearing. That's how brain works too. Every time we think something, if you think I'm stupid once, that's okay. If you think I'm stupid once a day, not so good. If you think I'm stupid once an hour, that's the way you address everything in life. You address it through I'm stupid and I'm unable. So when we change the paradigm, we shift the thought pattern from the damaging one to the healing one. Now, in physics, we know that whenever there is an electrical current, there is a magnetic field. So what is a magnetic field for a human being? It's our emotion. So for every thought, there is a corresponding field of emotion. So we are electromagnetic beings or thinking, feeling beings. As we change conscious or subconscious thought patterns, we shift the emotions. Or alternatively, a lot of people work on emotions. You can approach, there's no wrong way to heal. You can shift the emotion, and that will trigger the change in your thought patterns. Well, that electromagnetic being then sends the field then sends the frequency through the physical body and allows for the healing. So the spontaneous healings happen when there are no blocks to that change. So you make the shift and there are no blocks, and it happens instantaneously or spontaneously. It takes time sometimes when a person has several blocks in the way of that. So you need to resolve those and then witness a spontaneous healing. So in the case of my nephew, I was working on my brother-in-law, on my brother, my sister-in-law's genetic programming that went several generations for both of them, of being unloved. That's a hard program. Being understood. That's a hard program. Not mattering. That's a hard program. So a lot of these were shifted while I was doing quantum for him. Within 48 hours, an hour before his surgery, the doctor took over 200 images, and right in front of their eyes, the aorta was opening. In his file does state medical miracle. Now, the doctor said, we don't have an explanation for that, but we have witnessed it happen before. And so we need to see him in 4 months, in 6 months for his surgery, open surgery for the valves. But within 4 months, we've seen the valves were very short. The valve is something that has to flap to allow for the blood flow into the heart. And if the valve doesn't close, right, the heart is damaged. So in his case, the openings were very wide. It was 4 and 8 millimeters, non-functional valves. So within 4 to 6 months, we have seen the complete growth and closing of the valves. The hole in the heart was healed through all of the progressive healing, and the murmur was gone. And then he started growing. Cardiac babies, even full term, are born smaller. And so by the time he was 1 year old, he was taken off completely of the cardiac checks as a completely healthy little boy. And this is coming in, Richard, so I'll show that to you. We are a part of each, shared with you, we were a part of each other's stories. One of the things that I teach is how to foresee the future so that you can change it, right? I train people in their psychic ability to scan for the most probable future. And I tell them the only reason you do it is so that if you don't like it, you change it. And that's called manifesting. That's how future and manifestations are related. And you just train your brain that it can scan immediately. And so I fly a lot, I travel a lot. I was flying with my whole family, other than my husband, my 2 kids, their significant others at the time, and my mom. We go to a conference every year to California. We're flying through Denver. And as the plane was landing, I had this 1-second feeling we're going to crash. And I would have not remembered it, by the way, but I was like, yeah, no, let's just erase this picture. Let's manifest safe landing. And we were in a landing mode. As we're landing, as I witnessed that, the pilot says, you know what, we're not going to try to land it. The winds, we're going to come run from the other end. So he pulls the plane up. We shake quite a bit trying to come up. He flies around the wind. He lands it. And once again, I would not have thought twice about it, except that when I get off the plane, there is a text from my sister-in-law. And at that time, my nephew is 18 months old. And the text says, are you guys okay? And it is sent at a time that we changed the landing pattern.
Right.
And I called her. I said, why? She said, well, because Alex, Sasha, my little nephew, was asleep, taking a nap. And he woke up, he sat up in his bed, he pointed up with his little finger, and he said 2 words. He calls me Lala. He said, Lala, plane. And so that connection, that bond that we have created during the healing, that energy unity.
So many examples of this, I love the story. One of my favorite stories of this is Ingo Swann, Ingo Swann developed the remote viewing for the military, went and spied on the Soviet Union, quite successfully. He got a dream to invest in Madison Square Gardens before Madison Square Gardens was developed. And it was like this nothing company. And so he went to a friend of his who's stockbroker, and he said, I've had this dream. And he said, well, if I look at the stock, it's nothing. It's not, there's nothing I can say that you should buy this stock at all. So 30 days later, there's this development. Somebody's put like massive amounts of money into Madison Square Gardens. It goes from, $1 a stock to $70 a stock. This ridiculous growth. And he goes, Ingo phones his stockbroker and said, I told you about that. And he said, well, there was no reason, but if it's any consolation, because you came to me and you told me you'd had a dream, I bought stock. The stockbroker had heard a dream and said, well, I bought stock because I've learned to listen to my dreams and other people's dreams. And the stockbroker made a fortune. And Ingo, well, he said he learned his lesson, that he's always going to listen to his dreams from then on. Yeah. And he talks about Caesar. Caesar's wife said, don't go to the the forum today. Yeah, she had a whole dream about it. There's so many examples of this, and I love the story. I was also going along the lines. I was thinking there must be a very special connection between you and this kid now. I also felt, and it's just a picture that came, that there was an angelic presence when you were there. Is that right, or is it just?
Yeah. Richard, two amazing observations. I can't even wrap my mind around, just because it happens doesn't make it less miraculous every day. I've heard the story you just shared from an audiobook that I'm listening to right now. And yesterday I heard the story. The book is called Happier, Richer, Wiser by William Green. And the broker's name was Marks from the Oaks brokerage management. It's unbelievable that you just shared that story. With the angels, how two things that I want to share with that. At a time of birth, about 2 or 3 minutes before the baby was born, the room started being filled with the angels. And the angels, some of them were the family members that have already passed on or have not been born yet. And as they came in, they formed a beautiful circle around him. They just stood in a circle.
I love this, because was that the first time you'd had that, with like angels appearing in the room? Yeah, because I was thinking, like, very much, sometimes I feel, even me, when I'm doing energy work, is I feel like we need to throw all of our energy work books away. There's loads of stuff which just isn't in the books, which it's probably as important or more important. And if we're too focusing on, we can create a resistance by holding on too much onto our own little method. I'm always surprised how sometimes there's just an incredible energy field change that's just happening. And yes, I think we are part of it. I think you being there, you're like almost like a medium. Do you agree?
I like the word witness. It's a quantum physics word, right? Because the witness creates the framework for reality. So catalyst, medium, however you want to describe it. I like the word witness. And I tell people that I just happen to be somebody who is there to allow for healing to happen, but I'm not the healer. I know we were used the word healer, and I'm comfortable with the word, but I am not the healer. I have no power to heal somebody. Their innate ability to heal has to be witnessed for it to happen. That's just the quantum physics reality, right? And so and what I can increase is my ability to witness. And what you're describing so beautifully is that it's wonderful to read books as long as they expand our boundaries. But if we read the book and we allow for the opinion to become the truth, then we limit the truth. So that's kind of what it is. You can be a greater witness if you're open to everything and you say, I'm just here to witness. Whether I know what it is I'm witnessing or I'm learning what it is that I'm witnessing, I'm just here to witness. So that's the word that reminds me of a humble awareness. You know.
Yes, humility. Yes, that's beautiful. I'm curious to ask you, when did this angel thing come in for you? When did that appear?
The very first time I felt that presence was actually when I was a little girl, and we talked about me being shy and not having any friends. And so what I thought were my imaginary friends, I've learned were actually my children. I was talking to the angelic presence of my children to be. And the
Oh.
most amazing, and my daughter, I call her my angel, and she thinks it's cute. She's now 24, but she is my angel. And I want to share one story, Richard, that's coming in so strongly as to how we can be often that presence to ourselves. I was at that very dark time that I was sharing with you. I remember pleading and saying, I just need a way out. I need some light. I need some, clarity. And just really things were, we call it, I guess, could call it the dark night of the soul, when you just push through a lot of stuff. And I felt somebody come and hug me and hold me. And I thought, oh, this is so wonderful, and that was a grounding hug. And I've attributed it to the angelic hug at a time. And I felt immense peace and immense calmness. Now let's just forward 10, 11 years later, where I was at a very different place, truly living from a place of light and a place of living. And I would dedicate, and I still do, every day, I will connect to the divine and I'll say, who needs me most right now? And I will be shown a person, whether it's a family member or somebody I don't know, and I go to them, to the moment that I see energetically, and I witness a healing for them. So it was one day that I'm witnessing this and I'm asking, who needs me most right now? And I'm taken to the moment where you talk about the laws of time. I'm taken to the moment of where I'm on my knees and I'm pleading. And I went in and I held myself. And it closed this very empowering cycle of realization that if you go to the moments in your life where you felt most lonely, you can be there for you until other things happen. And so by completing the cycle, this is when I saw that at that moment, when I felt the loneliness, the room was full of angels. I just could not see them. I was not aware of them. And in our life, during those moments and during any moment, we're completely surrounded by divine presence. It's just our programming makes us blind to them.
I just feel you've got so many anecdotes and stories, and they're so fascinating. And you've got a lovely way of expressing them. I want you to tell. You've got some programs that are going on and ways that you can help people. And I want to, because I'm trying to keep it sort of within sort of an hour, and it's so easy. Like 45 minutes have gone, like just like that. It's just so easy. What do you? People can reach you for personal sessions, can they? Sort of.
Yes, so I can tell you some of the best ways to seek for help. The free one, we'll start with a couple gifts. I've mentioned I just launched All About the Voice podcast, and it's a beautiful journey for reconnecting with your divine knowing and empowering you for your healing. So that's for life. So that's the podcast. I have two apps. The first app is called iHappy Daily, and it's an energy activation in the form of affirmation that has an energy charge that activates 52 virtues, divine virtues. Every week is a certain virtue, and there's a written version and an audio version to that. Then I have a different app that we will be continually adding to that's called iHappy Me. So it's iHappy Me. And iHappy Me is the app of serendipity, because I'm so big on serendipity. It has a free portion to it, which is called My Blessings. So you take the phone, you shake it, and a blessing you need at the moment pops up for you. And then it has a subscription part to it, which is minimal subscription. And there are different sets. There is My Money, and it has energy laws of money and the activation and the exercise. There's My Grief, which has 90 aspects of grief. When a person is grieving, they go through 90 aspects of grief. And I take neurolinguistics programming visualizations and I make them very short. So same thing, you click and it comes up to you energetically what you're aligned with, that you're processing consciously or subconsciously. And there's a validation, healing visualization, and an affirmation with a hand on your heart. Very powerful app. We're just about to add 3 minutes meditations to it. So those are the entry points. And then you can learn of every single other program on my website, which is you2shine.com. Why with why you2 shine SHINE.com, and that's number 2.
That the number 2. Yeah, I was going to say, okay, that's great. So we can send people over there to I mean, I'm going to go over there. I want to go on the website. I want to download the app because I think there's so many ways that different people connect. There isn't one way, is there? And in a way, like I'm much more about feeling, and I'm much more about serendipity. Like stuff just happens, and it happens when it happens. And of course, I'm doing my practices, but sometimes it's just, it's kind of amazing. I feel like it would be the best thing we could do is invite you back, and we could talk more about your stories, your healing stories, because we've covered. Well, we could talk about healing stories. We could also talk about the whole money manifestation and where you shifted, because you must have gone through, like coming from the Soviet Union, coming to America. I mean, there must have been like enormous challenges there. I think you've got some stories which, for me, the idea of stories is yes, I'm interested, but I think stories is the best way of learning. Yeah. It's like telling you the story about that Ingo Swann story about the Madison Square Gardens. I know that from his book, from Ingo's book, so that it's from another book. It's just like, it's kind of amazing. So I just feel stories are just a wonderful way. And it also reminds people, like, there's no difference between you and the president and, everyone else, so yeah. So please come back.
I would love to. This has been the most pleasant hanging out spiritually.
Yeah, I feel like it's a radio show. Like I really do feel like I didn't know that I had the ability to just chat with people for an hour, and really I could just go on and talk more and more. And one thing I'm also keen, if anybody else is keen, is to do it like on Facebook Live and have people come in with their questions or with their life problems and get some from insight. So from your point of view and from my point of view.
Oh, I think, Richard, we can do better than that. We can just heal people. Talking is great, but we could just heal people. People can come on and we can heal them live. That's just a little benefit,
You know what? It's so funny because I can say yes to that. And then if I advertise on Facebook that I'm healing people, they absolutely won't allow that. In Germany, you get put in prison for it.
I know.
So it's a funny old thing.
I know what we'll do. We'll be showing them possibilities. You can do that legally and shift their paradigms. You can do that legally. And that actually leads to healing, but we don't need to disclose.
Exactly. So we're just doing it, in the other way. Lovely. Fantastic.
Thank you.
So let's keep in touch and talk soon, and you'll be back.